most people, if not all, start their spiritual journey by trying to be spiritually correctly. They listen to teachers, observe their ways, and often tiptoe around, trying to avoid making spiritual mistakes. This is not strange, because we all have to begin somewhere, but that is exactly why it is worth noticing how easily this attitude takes hold of us and to see where it leads. Many of us compare ourselves to others that we consider more spiritual than we are, and without noticing, this can give rise to a whole range of tensions or a feeling of unworthiness. We can easily believe that spirituality requires from us that we follow a certain set of rules or practices that put us on a path that will one day bring us to a better and more peaceful way of being somewhere in the future. As we learn to listen to others for instructions, delve into traditions, read literature, and pay close attention to teachings and teachers, we are in danger of gradually listening more to external voices rather than trusting our own inner experience. In this way, we can become very skilled followers who learn how to practice and repeat insights. We can become knowledgeable in applying instructions that we believe will result in a more peaceful, serene, loving, and above all, spiritually awakened self in the future. At times, this even feels like a progress, often because we are encouraged or recognized by others. Yet, in the background, we may sense a faint unease that may not be strong enough to be called doubt, but present enough to return to us from time to time. This unease reveals to us that something essential has not been touched fully, even though it can be ignored for years. As spiritual obedience effectively maintains our ego, we can ignore our unease for many years. The quest to be a perfect follower keeps the story going, while the obedient I remains intact. We may acquire more knowledge and learn new techniques, while we still remain the same person, only as a more sophisticated and a more restricted version of ourselves. The ancients knew this tendency of the I very well, which is why they did not speak of improvement, but of interruption. They spoke of a stop so complete that our usual sense of direction disappears, often leaving us in confusion. In our spiritual school, we call this endura, which means the end of self-maintenance. It doesn't mean improving the ego, but withdrawing from it. And even when we try to explain this, it is easily misunderstood because our ego tends to interpret the dying of the ego as a frightening idea or a future goal of something higher that needs to be achieved. But endura is not something that we gain or do. Rather, it happens when we stop keeping ourselves together. We can see that in our ordinary life, we have the tendency to move forward by carrying the past with us. All our memories, ambitions, and preferences are woven into an identity, into a sense of self that moves from yesterday to tomorrow. Our search for spirituality follows the same pattern until we realize that we are adding new knowledge to our old structure. We can add a lot of meaning to our story or depth to our personality, while true spirituality does not add anything, it subtracts. We can understand this by thinking of a seed. A seed does not grow by extending itself. It does not slowly become more and more seed-like. There comes a moment when the seed fails at being a seed. It namely breaks. To our personal identity, that is to our I, any kind of breaking feels like failure. And still, it is only through this breaking that new growth, soul growth, can appear. If a seed tried to preserve its form, it would never become a tree or a flower. It would only become a larger seed, never revealing what lies hidden within. As human egos, we are conditioned to remain intact, by which spiritual growth is then misunderstood as becoming more instead of becoming less. We then decorate our shells and refine our habits, while we try to spiritualize our personality. Meanwhile, the soul waits, like the sun that warms the earth, waiting for a seed to crack open. This cracking open begins when our unrest becomes so strong that our old motivations no longer serve us. It usually starts quietly in the background without us even noticing it. We may still meditate, read, and speak about the path, while inwardly we sense that some certainty is getting lost. We can feel this like bareness and emptiness or a loss of inspiration, but it is neither of those. What withdraws from us is namely not the soul, but the illusion that we are getting somewhere with all our efforts. At this point, our rigid obedience to systems, teachers, or techniques begins to lose its meaning because they belong to the world of forms, while what is awakening in us, in our soul, is not made of form at all. This is where a kind of rebellion appears, not against teachers nor great traditions, but against the way in which we own them and polish and perfect our old self. Once we see this, we stop feeding familiar inner fires. Our need to progress, our need to understand, our need to be recognized as a good pupil on the path. At first, this feels like emptiness because the familiar role dissolves. To the old I, it feels like annihilation, while to the soul, this gives space. It is in this space that the rose of the heart pushes through the old form, while it turns into a new center of gravity. Life quietly begins to reorganize around something calm and new, gradually simplifying our entire being. Certain pursuits that drove us before now lose their urgency. Certain conflicts that rose in us now lose their fuel. Certain words that spilled over from our mouths now fall silent because we no longer feel the need to assert ourselves. In this kind of disobedience to old methods and ways, a different obedience appears, one that is aligned with our eternal center. The ego only knows to obey outer masters. It maintains itself because it is afraid of losing itself, while the soul only can obey the inner master, for it recognizes in its inner silence what is true. And it is in this silence that nothing needs to be explained anymore. As a new center, one that does not lie outside us, but inside us, gains gravity. And in this gravity, we slowly begin to understand what is meant by the new life. A life that does not command us or instruct us from the outside, but one that rests on the sacred inner power. Our ears become deaf to the old, and we start to defy it as we rise to the eternity that resonates in our soul. The ego only knows to obey outer masters. It maintains itself because it is afraid of losing itself, while the soul only can obey the inner master, for it recognizes in its inner silence what is true. This rebellion is one of the greatest secrets of life. It is a secret that our old life cannot touch, while it sets us free in a radiant new reality.